Let me take you back to the first time you had a little extra money. Maybe it was $500. Maybe it was $1,000. Maybe it was a bonus, a gift, a paycheck that hit different because the bills were already covered. What did you do with it? Because I want you to think about that honestly. Not what you wish you did. What you actually did. Did you spend it? Did you save it? Did you invest it? Did you just let it sit there until something came up and it disappeared? Because here's what most people don't realize. What you do with your first $1,000 is almost exactly what you'll do with your first $10,000. And what you do with $10,000 is almost exactly what you will do with $100,000. The amounts change, the behavior doesn't, unless you make a deliberate decision to change it. Your relationship with money doesn't upgrade automatically when the number goes up. You have to upgrade it on purpose. And in this video, I'm going to walk you through every level from your very first $1,000 all the way to your first million, and show you exactly what people do with money at each level, why most people stay stuck, and what the ones who actually make it do differently. This isn't theory, this is a pattern. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. Let's get into it. Level 1, your first $1,000, the moment that reveals everything. Level 1, your first $1,000. This is the moment that tells you more about your financial future than almost anything else. Not because $1,000 is a life-changing amount of money, but because of what it triggers in you. For most people, $1,000 in extra cash creates one of three reactions. The first reaction, and the most common, is spending. The money shows up and suddenly there are 100 reasons to use it. New shoes, a night out, something you've been putting off buying. The phone upgrade you convinced yourself you needed. It feels like reward. It feels like finally. And then it's gone. And 2 weeks later, you're back to zero, wondering where it went. Sound familiar? The second reaction is hesitation. The money sits in your account and you don't do anything with it because you don't know what to do with it. You think about it, you Google what to do with $1,000. You watch a few videos and then life happens. A car repair, an unexpected bill, a casual expense, and the money disappears without ever being intentional. The third reaction, the one that changes everything, is decision. You treat that $1,000 like it matters. You give it a job before it arrives. You decide in advance, this money is going here and it's not moving. Here's the truth about your first $1,000. It is not enough to change your life, but it is enough to change your habits. And your habits are what will eventually change your life. What the stuck person does with $1,000, spends most of it, justifies it as a reward for working hard, saves a small piece, maybe $100, with vague intentions, watches the $100 slowly disappear over the next few weeks for small purchases, ends up back at zero. What the person going somewhere does with $1,000, puts $500 into an emergency fund immediately, untouchable, uses $300 to pay down a high interest debt, takes $200 and opens or adds to an investment account, even if it feels pointless at this size. Not because $200 will make them rich, but because the behavior of investing, the habit of treating money as a tool rather than a treat, is the thing that compounds over time. The $1,000 decision is not about the money. It is about who you decide to be when money shows up. Level 2, your first $5,000. The foundation. Test. Level 2, $5,000. At this point, you've accumulated something. You've been consistent enough, disciplined enough, or fortunate enough to have $5,000 sitting somewhere. This is where the real foundation gets built, or doesn't. And here's what's interesting about $5,000. It's just enough to feel significant, and that feeling is dangerous. $5,000 feels like a lot when you've never had it. It feels like something to protect, and that protective instinct, while understandable, can actually work against you at this level. Because people with $5,000 often do one of two things. They either hold on to it so tightly that it never grows, or they spend it on something big because big money deserves a big purchase. Neither of those moves builds wealth. What the stuck person does with $5,000 finally takes a trip they've been putting off. I deserve it. Or buys furniture, electronics, something tangible, or keeps it in a regular savings account earning 0.01% interest, telling themselves they're being responsible. 5 years later, they still have roughly $5,000. Maybe a little more, maybe a little less, because the money was never put to work. What the person going somewhere does with $5,000. First, they make sure they have an emergency fund of at least 3 months of expenses covered. If that's not done yet, $5,000 is the moment to do it. Full stop. An emergency fund isn't being boring with your money. It's buying yourself the freedom to take smart risks later without desperation forcing bad decisions. Second, They start educating themselves on where to put money that isn't an emergency fund, a high yield savings account, a stocks and shares ISA, an index fund. They don't need to be experts, they need to start. Because the most expensive financial mistake at this level isn't making the wrong investment, it's making no investment at all. Third, they start thinking about income. $5,000 in savings with one income stream is still fragile. The person going somewhere starts asking, what skill do I have that someone would pay for? What side project could I test with low risk? Not because they need the money right now, but because a second stream of income, even a small one, changes your entire financial psychology. $5,000 is not your destination, it is your launch pad. Level 3, your first $10,000. The turning point. Nobody talks about level 3, $10,000. This is the level where the gap between people who build wealth and people who don't starts to become very visible. $10,000 is the first number where your decisions about money start to have meaningful long-term consequences. Not life-changing in the short term, but directionally significant. What you do here sets the trajectory for everything that follows. And here's the pattern I see over and over again at this level. People who reach $10,000 in savings or liquid assets often feel like they've made it to some degree. There's a psychological checkpoint that gets hit. And that checkpoint, meaning that feeling of I've worked hard and I have something to show for it, creates a new temptation. The temptation to finally live a little. The temptation to spend in ways that match the number in the account rather than the habits that built it. This is what financial experts call the $10,000 trap. Not a technical term, just a pattern. You finally have enough to feel comfortable. And comfort, as we've talked about before, is one of the most expensive feelings in personal finance. What the stuck person does with $10,000. Upgrades their lifestyle, new car payments, a nicer apartment, better holidays. They don't blow it all at once. They just gradually start spending in ways that reflect having money rather than building money. 12 months later, the account still says $10,000 or less because every raise and every saving has been absorbed by a higher cost of living. What the person going somewhere does with $10,000, they split it with a clear strategy. Emergency fund fully stocked? Check. Now, the rest goes to work. A meaningful chunk goes into investments, index funds, ETFs, whatever their chosen vehicle, not savings, investments. Because at $10,000, the difference between money sitting still and money compounding starts to actually matter. They also start thinking about tax efficiency. Is this money in the right kind of account? Are they using available tax advantage accounts, ISAs, 401ks, pension contributions, to make sure the government takes as little as legally possible? And critically, they start protecting their income, insurance, skills that make them harder to replace at work, the beginnings of a side income, because $10,000 in savings disappears fast when the income stops. The goal at this level is not just to have the money, it's to make sure you keep it and grow it. $10,000 is where your financial identity gets decided. Are you someone who builds or someone who spends what they build? Level 4, your first $50,000. The leverage level, level 4, $50,000. If you've reached $50,000 in net worth or liquid assets, you are already ahead of the overwhelming majority of people your age. That's not flattery. That's a statistical fact. And it means the habits that got you here have been working. But $50,000 introduces a new set of decisions. Bigger decisions, decisions with real consequences either way. At this level, money starts to have enough mass to generate meaningful momentum, if you position it correctly. Compound interest stops being a concept you understand intellectually and starts being something you can actually feel in your account. Here's what happens at $50,000. What the stuck person does with $50,000. This is the level where a lot of people make what feels like a smart decision, but is actually a wealth limiting one. They put the money into property, not as an investment strategy, but as a status move. They buy something they can point to, something real, something that says, I've made it. And while property can absolutely be a smart investment, buying it emotionally at this level, overstretching on a primary residence, ignoring other asset classes, putting all financial eggs in one illiquid basket, often slows the journey significantly. Or they start a business without the right foundation, spending the $50,000 on overhead, branding, and equipment before there's a proven model. Not because the business idea is bad, because the timing and method are. What the person going somewhere does with $50,000. They think in terms of allocation. How do I divide this across asset classes in a way that balances growth, security, and opportunity? A portion stays liquid, accessible. A portion is in long-term investments, growing steadily. A portion may go into a business, but a lean one with low startup costs and a focus on proving the model before scaling it. They also start thinking about leverage at this level, not reckless debt, smart leverage, a mortgage on an investment property that generates rental income above the mortgage cost, a business loan for a proven idea that needs fuel rather than a foundation. The distinction between debt that makes money and debt that costs money becomes crystal clear at $50,000, and the person going somewhere understands it deeply. Most importantly, they stop thinking about the $50,000 as a destination and start thinking about it as a vehicle. It's not the goal, it's the engine. Level 5, your first $100,000. The compounding moment. Level 5, $100,000. This is the number Warren Buffett himself has called the hardest to get me and the most important, not because of what $100,000 buys you, but because of what it does when you leave it alone. At $100,000 properly invested, compound interest starts doing work that is genuinely visible. At a 10% average annual return, which has historically been close to the S&P 500 long-term average, $100,000 becomes $110,000 in 1 year without you doing a single thing. That's $10,000 earned by money, not by you. That number doubles roughly every 7 years at that rate without adding a single dollar. But here is the brutal truth about $100,000. Most people who reach it never feel it, because by the time they get to $100,000 in an investment account, they're making enough money that lifestyle inflation has kept pace. Their expenses are higher, their fixed costs are higher. The psychological feeling of having $100,000 doesn't match the theoretical power of it because they're spending as much as they were building. What the stuck person does with $100,000 diversifies in the wrong way, spreads money across too many things, a bit in this account, a bit in that one, a few speculative investments, some in cash, some in a business idea that hasn't been validated. The money is technically invested, but it's so scattered that nothing has enough mass to move meaningfully. This is called diversification, the illusion of smart investing without the results. What the person going somewhere does with $100,000, they simplify. They concentrate their best ideas. They understand that at this level, the biggest enemy is not bad investment. It's distraction. They pick a clear investment strategy, automate it, and refuse to chase every shiny opportunity that shows up. They also start building income aggressively because $100,000 is impressive, but $100,000 with a $200,000 annual income is transformational. The focus shifts from saving more to earning more because at this level, the limiting factor is usually income, not expenses. They start buying back their time, hiring a cleaner, using delivery services, outsourcing low-value tasks. Not because they're showing off, but because they understand that their time at this level is worth more per hour than it costs to pay someone else to do the things that don't require them personally. $100,000 is where money starts working for you, but only if you stop treating it like something to spend and start treating it like something to deploy. Level 6, your first $500,000, the point of no return. Level 6, $500,000. At this point, the rules of the game have genuinely changed. $500,000 properly positioned means your money is generating somewhere between $25,000 and $75,000 per year passively, depending on how it's allocated. That's a part-time salary produced by your net worth alone. You are no longer entirely dependent on selling your time to survive. That is a fundamental shift, and this is where the people who make it to the million behave completely differently from everyone else. What keeps people stuck at $500,000? Lifestyle creep that finally catches up. The cars, the house, the holidays, the private schools, all of it justified because I've worked hard and I can afford it. And technically, they can, but affording something and being strategically smart about it are two different things. At this level, the people who stall out start spending like they've already arrived. And in doing so, they stop the momentum that was carrying them forward. What the person building to $1 million does with $500,000. They live well below their means, intentionally and enthusiastically. Not because they're miserable, but because they've done the math. They know exactly how close they are. They know that staying disciplined for another 3 to 5 years will put them in a position where money is never a stressor again. And that trade, a few more years of discipline for a lifetime of security, is the easiest decision they've ever made. They invest in their health aggressively at this level. Sleep, nutrition, exercise, mental clarity, because they've realized that the biggest risk to their financial future isn't a market crash. It's their own deteriorating ability to make good decisions. Health is the most underrated financial investment at every level, but at $500,000, where the decisions get bigger and the stakes get higher, it becomes critical. They also start giving deliberately, contributing to causes, communities, and people that align with their values, not just for altruistic reasons, but because generosity at scale creates influence, trust, and legacy, things that money alone doesn't buy. Level 7, your first million. What nobody tells you about arriving. Level 7, your first million. Let's be honest about something first. $1 million or £1,000,000 is not what it used to be. In most major cities, it doesn't buy you a mansion. It doesn't mean you never work again. The financial independence number for most people, the number where your investments generate enough passive income to cover your living costs entirely, is closer to 2 or 3 million, depending on your lifestyle. But reaching your first million is still one of the most psychologically significant financial milestones a person can hit. Not because of what it buys, but because of what it proves. It proves that your habits work. It proves that your system works. It proves that the long game is real. So what do people actually do when they get there? The myth versus the reality. Most people imagine that reaching $1 million feels like arriving, like a finish line, like you can finally exhale. And there is a moment of that, absolutely. A moment of deep satisfaction that is completely earned. But the feeling passes faster than you expect, because the person who built to $1 million through discipline and intentional habit, that person doesn't suddenly change. Their frugality doesn't disappear. Their curiosity doesn't disappear. Their drive doesn't disappear, because those things were never about the number. They were about the identity. The millionaire built by habits doesn't stop. They just aim higher. They think bigger. They start asking different questions. Not, how do I get to $1 million, but what do I do with this platform? What the person who built it through discipline does at $1 million, they review their full financial picture with a professional, tax strategy, estate planning, generational wealth structures, not because they're paranoid, but because at this level, not having a plan is the most expensive mistake you can make. They redefine their relationship with risk. With $1 million properly invested and their lifestyle costs covered by passive income, they can take bigger swings with their active income. They can bet on a business. They can invest in a friend's idea. They can take career risks that would have been devastating before. The safety net changes everything about the decisions you're willing to make, and they focus on what they actually care about: legacy, impact, family, experiences, contribution, because the person who builds to $1 million through genuine discipline, not luck, not inheritance, not a single big break, that person knows that money is the vehicle, not the destination. They've always known that. The pattern, again, what every level has in common. Step back and look at every level we just walked through, from $1,000 to $1 million, from the first decision to the final milestone. Do you see the pattern? It was never about the amount. At every single level, the people who moved forward and the people who stayed stuck were separated by one thing: their decision about what money is for. The people who stayed stuck at every level treated money as a reward, something you earn and then spend as evidence of your effort, something that proves you've worked hard. The people who move forward treated money as a tool, something you direct with intention, something that carries a job and a purpose the moment it arrives. That mindset, money as a tool, not a trophy, is a single thread that runs through every level from $1,000 to $1 million. And here's the most important thing I want you to take from this video. You don't have to wait until you have more money to start thinking like someone who builds wealth. The thinking comes first. The money follows the thinking, not the other way around. Start with whatever you have right now. $500, $50, it doesn't matter. Give it a job. Make a decision. Treat it like it matters. Because it does. Not because of what it is, but because of what it teaches you about how to handle what's coming next. So here's my question for you. Which level are you at right now? And more importantly, when you look at how you've been handling money at your current level, does it match the habits of someone going somewhere, or does it match the habits of someone staying put? Be honest. No judgment, just clarity. Because clarity is where change starts. Drop your level in the comments. $1,000, $5,000, $10,000, $50,000, $100,000, $500,000, or Million Club. I read every single comment and I genuinely want to know where you are so I can make content that actually helps you move to the next level. If this video shifted something for you, share it. Send it to one person who needs to hear it, because the people in your circle leveling up will pull you up with them. Subscribe, hit the bell, and I'll see you in the next one. The journey from survival to empire starts with a single decision. Make yours today.